This is Corey Hannes, Senior Electrical Specialist with NFPA. Wanted to talk to you today a little bit about OSHA and NFPA 70E and how those two things tie together. So there's a long history behind it, which we'll get into here in a minute, but everyone knows OSHA that does work here in the United States. As an employer, you have to meet certain requirements to keep your employees safe. And those requirements that need to happen from an electrical perspective are often tied back to NFPA 70E. So the reality, the overarching message here today is that OSHA, gives you the requirements that you need to perform as an employer to keep your employees safe, but NFPA 70E is the means in how you're going to do that from an electrical perspective. So let's dig into that a little bit. I want to jump into NFPA link, and I'm going to go into the 2024 edition of NFPA 70E. I want to show you something that might get missed quite a bit from folks when you're digging in here. So there's this section called Origins. And with that, gives a little information about the document, when it was issued. So in this case, it was issued by the Standards Council on April 23rd, 2023, and became effective on May 13th, 2023. So this is the most current, even though it's dated 2024, and we're in 2025 right now, this is the most current edition of NFPA 70E that's being utilized. Of course, it's on a 3-year cycle, so in 2027, we'll have a new 2027 edition. So with that, I wanted to get into the forward down here, and this gives an overview of kind of the tie between NFPA 70E and OSHA. So it became apparent that the need existed for a new standard tailored to fulfill OSHA's responsibilities that would still be fully consistent with the NEC. Now that's a little bit of an odd statement, the NEC tying to OSHA, because we know the NEC is tied to electrical installations or safe electrical installations. So to have something dealing with keeping your employees safe just doesn't feel right. And eventually they decided that it wasn't, and we got into what transpired after that. Now what I do want to go into, and there's going to be a little bit of me reading and dialogue here, because in the preface, in the NFPA 70E handbook, there's quite a bit more information. Like what's in 70E in link here with the origin section is good. It gives you a decent amount here up front. But the handbook, which is this component right here, if you guys haven't seen this one, so not the softback, but the hardcover version is what I'm in. And this is the preface to this. And I want to read a few paragraphs here that go essentially from OSHA's establishment, as part of the OSHA Act in 1970. It goes on and talks about how the NEC was first used by OSHA to kind of keep employees safe, then didn't figure out that it wasn't really the right thing to use, and this new document needed to be created, and then where we went from there. So in 1970, Congress responded to the public's demand for safer workplaces and passed the OSHA Act. Under this act, employers in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and other U.S. territories are responsible for providing safe and healthful workplaces for their employees. The OSHA Act was signed into law on December 29, 1970. The act created OSHA, the administrative and prosecutorial branch under the U.S. Department of Labor. OSHA's role is to ensure safe and healthful workplaces for America's working men and women by setting and enforcing standards and providing training, education, and assistance. The Act also created the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission, or OSHRC, which is the independent federal agency created to process contested citations or penalties resulting from OSHA inspections of American workplaces. Originally, OSHA adopted the NEC as its electrical safety standard by reference. In addition to installation standards derived from the NEC, there was a need for electrical safety-related work practices and guidelines for the maintenance of electrical systems considered critical to safety. A separate standard became necessary to provide requirements for safe work practices for people who might be exposed to electrical hazards. In May 1975, a meeting was held between the National Electrical Manufacturers Association, or NEMA, and the U.S. Department of Labor to discuss a new approach to updating the Electrical Occupational Safety and Health Standards, Subpart S of Part 1910. That meeting led to the concept of a document being put together by extracting suitable portions from the NEC and other documents applicable to electrical safety. A proposal was presented to the NFPA electrical section, which unanimously supported the development of a document to be used as the basis for evaluating electrical safety in the workplace. On January 7, 1976, the Standards Council of NFPA appointed the Committee on Electrical Safety Requirements for Employee Workplaces. The first edition of NFPA 70E in 1979 included only Part 1, Installation Safety Requirements, which dealt primarily with those electrical installation requirements from the NEC that were most directly tied to worker safety. On January 16, 1981, OSHA revised its electrical installation standard for general industry by replacing the references to the 1971 NEC with relevant requirements from Part 1 of the 1979 edition of NFPA 70E. This simplified and clarified the electrical standard. The OSHA standard was written mainly in performance-based language versus prescriptive-based language in NFPA 70E to reduce the need for frequent revision and to avoid technological obsolescence. Although unsafe work practices appeared to be involved in most workplace electrocutions, OSHA had very few regulations addressing the work practices necessary for electrical safety. OSHA's electrical safety-related work practices went into effect on December 4, 1990, and were based on Part 2, Safety-Related Work Practices of the 1983 edition of NFPA 70E. The new standards, written mainly in performance-based language, addressed the practices and procedures necessary to protect employees working on or near exposed energized and de-energized parts of electrical equipment. The General Duty Clause, Section 5A1 of the OSHA Act, requires that an employer provide a place of employment that is free from recognized hazards that cause or are likely to cause death or serious physical injury. Employers are required to follow the OSHA regulations and not non-mandatory standards. However, consensus standards can help employers recognize hazards and provide feasible means to mitigate injuries from those hazards. Following national consensus standards can help employers meet their obligations under OSHA requirements. OSHA looks to NFPA 70E to fill out the performance-based requirements included in their standards, especially since NFPA 70E is the American national standard on the subject and sets the bar for safe work practices. This creates a symbolic relationship between NFPA 70E and OSHA standards for electrical safety. So I know that's a lot of reading, but I wanted to get that across to everybody because I don't think everyone gets an opportunity to truly understand how aligned OSHA and NFPA 70E are. We have this origin section in NFPA 70E in Link that we can utilize to get a little snippet of that. The handbook, if you choose to purchase that, the hardcover version, gives you that extra enhanced content, things of that nature, but also gives you that preface that gives a lot more detail into essentially when OSHA was created, how the NEC was initially used, how they figured out that wasn't really what was needed because that was based more for installations, and the focus needed to be more on worker safety. That initial, development of NFPA 70E still kind of leaned towards that installation side, and then in 1983, it delved into the Part 2 where it really started to shift its focus to the employee side, keeping those employees safe, and then from there. So essentially, like I said at the beginning of this, really, OSHA tells you as an employer what you have to do, to keep your employees safe. It's a requirement from the government, and then NFPA 70E gives you the means of how to do that with those safe work practices. So I hope this helps. I just want to give you guys a little bit of detail here and remind you, until next time, stay current and stay safe. Thank you. Electrical specialist with NFPA.